Thank you.
Great. So you can see the slides and hear me and see me okay?
Yes, Prabhu, we can.
Yes, we can.
The Wi-Fi at the manor can be notorious for cutting in and out, so I apologize in advance if that does happen, but hopefully it shouldn't. Fingers crossed. Yeah, so for this session, I was thinking what to say, and I took a few sources, a few things about Prabhupada I wanted to share about his connection to Kartik and Vrindavan. Then also there's a beautiful commentary to this Damodarastakam, which I think Antaranga Prabhu also shared with you some points from that in the first session. So we'll share a few points from the commentary and then also some things from my spiritual master's book. His Holiness Shiva Maharaj wrote a beautiful book on the pastime of Damodar. It's called Damodar Janani. So yeah, these three things I wanted to kind of look into. But like I said, keep it interactive. You can all chip in your own points or ask questions throughout, and we'll try and finish up by 8:30 sharp. Okay, so who knows who composed the Damodarastakam? You can shout it out or you can put it on the chat.
Satyavrata Muni.
Okay, yeah, Satyavrata Muni. This is written down in the Padma Purana, composed by Satyavrata Muni. But it also appears in two other places, in two other shastras. So actually appears in a conversation between Narad and Shonaka Rishi. And does anyone know where the third place is where it appears? Anyone want to guess? No? Okay, I also didn't know until I did the research. So it's actually in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So in those three places, these prayers are written down. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So the first thing I wanted to share with you was actually something I read about Srila Prabhupada during Kartik. This was before the Krishna Balaram temple had been built, Prabhupada invited the devotees to come to Vrindavan, and it was during Kartik. And so the Prabhupada was staying in his rooms at Radha Damodar temple. I'm sure you'll have seen those rooms or at least seen photos of them. And the devotees were staying at Keshi Ghat, they were staying in an ashram there. The Krishna Balaram temple hadn't been built at that time. And each morning they would go to the Krishna Balaram temple site, and all the devotees would sit there and chant japa together. And then Prabhupada did these beautiful, and you can see these pictures here. Prabhupada did this series of lectures. I don't know if any of you have heard this series of lectures on the Nectar of Devotion. So it's a really beautiful series of lectures that Prabhupada gave. You can find them online still on the Nectar of Devotion. And he did this, these weren't preaching lectures. These were invite only. So this was just for the devotees. Prabhupada gave these very, very, and more in-depth lectures as well. Very sweet, but also very much more in-depth than his normal style of just preaching lectures. So this is just for the devotees, and every day they would come together. Prabhupada would read from Nectar of Devotion, and he would share about deeper aspects of Krishna consciousness. And even one of the days he took them a parikram a few times, and one of the days he took them to Seva Kunj. Seva Kunj is where the Rasa dance took place. So Prabhupada took them there on one of his morning walks, and he was speaking pastimes of Krishna, and telling them all about the rasa dance and all these different things. And so devotees sometimes say that Prabhupada didn't give everything, but actually he did, and he was giving so much in Krishna consciousness. So before we continue any further, I should offer my obeisances to Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnavas. We'll just say a short Mangalacharan. Udyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyachya Deshatarne. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shivasi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so yeah, I strongly recommend that everyone listens to these Nectar of Devotion lectures. You can find them online if you search up Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion lectures in Vrindavan. So yeah, Prabhupada was also encouraging devotees to go deeper. Yeah. Okay, so let's get on to the first verse, or the first verse that we're going to discuss this week, verse 5. Okay, so in verse 4, Satyavrata Muni is asking for this form to be always manifest in his heart. He talks about this form of Bal Gopal, and may this always be manifest in my heart. That was his request in the last verse, in verse 4. So now he's describing that form that he's seeing and wants to see in his heart. So he's describing the beautiful face of Krishna in this verse and asking to again see this form again and again, to be manifest in his heart. So he's asking for the same thing twice. Very interesting that he's repeating this same request. So in his comments, Sanatana Goswami says this is very significant because he's repeating this request twice, that he wants to see Krishna within his heart. In this very short composition, he's repeating this twice. So we'll just go through a few of the words. He's describing the face of Krishna, and he's saying it's surrounded. This word vritam means it's surrounded by kuntala, by the curling hair of Krishna, beautiful curling hair. And it says that this hair is glossy. It's avyakta nila. It's dark blue, and it's snigdha. It's very glossy, and it's also tinged with red. So it's rakta. His hair is dark, glossy, and also tinged with red. And then the word vritam suggests that just as a lotus flower is surrounded by hovering honeybees, Sanatana Goswami says. So this is from Sanatana Goswami's commentary. He says that a lotus flower is often surrounded by honeybees. Similarly, the Lord's lotus face is encircled with his curly locks that bounce around when he moves. And then we move on to this word gopya, snigdha rakchaischa gopya, which means by the gopi. So Sanatana Goswami says that his face is being kissed again and again by Mother Yashoda, or this gopi could also mean Srimati Radharani. Sanatana Goswami says it could be either of the two. Then we come on to Muhus chumbitam bimba rakta dharamme. So he whose lips are cherry red like the bimba fruits. I don't know if anyone's seen a bimba fruit. Anyone actually seen it? Yeah. Anyone tried a bimba fruit? Tried to eat one? You can actually get bimba candies. I never had one, but I've seen them. And then he says, Lakshalabe, Manasavirastam alam Lakshalabe. Lakshalabe means millions of other types of benedictions. Alam, they are no use to me. So Manasya Avirastam, may this always be manifest in my heart. Everything else is of useless to me. So I was also thinking, I just wanted to see. I was very interested in the lotus analogy because it's often used for Krishna as looking like a blue lotus. So I just looked online what a blue lotus looks like. I never seen one in real life. I've seen other lotus flowers, but never a blue one. So this is some photos of the blue lotus. They're very, very beautiful. So it said that Krishna is somewhat like this color. And there's a bimba fruit, for those of you who haven't seen. But yeah, Krishna's somewhat like the blue lotus, although it's very difficult to compare Krishna to something because he's the source of that thing as well. So sometimes Krishna is compared to a lotus flower, or he's compared to the moon, or he's compared to all these beautiful objects in the world. But that doesn't really do it justice, because Krishna is also the source of those things, and he's the source of the beauty from those things. So how can you really compare something to the source of that thing? It's not possible. But just to give us some hint, some insight into the beauty of Krishna, then he's compared to things like the lotus and the moon and other beautiful elements from the material world that we see around us. So that's the bimba fruit. His lips are said to be this color, just like the bimba fruit, very red. Okay, before we go on, any questions about this verse? There's a few more points. But any questions about verse 5 before we move to verse 6? You can put in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. Okay, Anitaban says bimba fruit sabji is really nice. Okay, I never tasted that, but yeah, definitely one day maybe you can bring some for us all to try. Okay. Yeah, so basically in verse 4 and 5, Krishna is saying, not Krishna, Sanatana Goswami, not Sanatana Goswami, that's his commentary, but Satyavati Muni is saying that he wants to see Krishna in his heart. He wants to see this form, this beautiful form of Krishna within his heart. But next verse, he's actually switching things up a bit and he's asking for something more. He's increasing his desire. He wants to see Krishna not just within his heart, but he actually wants to see Krishna in front of his eyes. He wants to physically see Krishna. And this is a higher benediction because seeing Krishna within the heart is a revelation, but seeing him before our very eyes is something higher, something deeper. So in verse 6, Satyavati Muni is asking not just to see within his heart, but he wants to see the form of Krishna for his very eyes. And so how does he pray? It's very interesting. Sanatana Goswami in his commentary says that here Satyavati Muni is giving a good structure for prayers in general. So he doesn't start immediately asking what he wants. He first starts Namo Devo Damota Ananta Vishnu. So he starts by chanting the holy names of Krishna. He starts through Harinam, through the holy name, and through glorifying Krishna. So Sanatana Goswami says this is the first step in a prayer, is that we should first glorify Krishna. We should first offer some glorification. We should chant the holy names of Krishna. And that should be our mood in chanting. Then he gives the mood of our chanting. He says, Prasida Prabho Dukha Jalabdi Magnan, that I'm feeling very low. I'm very ignorant. But I'm praying for this mercy. And this was the mood of his chanting. And this should also be the mood of our chanting. This humility, this feeling very low, but also feeling hopeful, like in this verse. Please shower your glance of mercy. So feeling very low, but also feeling hopeful that maybe he will reveal himself to us. And Rupa Goswami gives this very famous, very, very beautiful verse. He says, Naima Shavanadir Bhaktirapiva Yogutava Vaishnavo, Gyanam Vashrubakarma Vakyadaho Sajjatiapya Stiva, Inartidi Kasadake Twaita Tapya Cheda Malasiti, Hey Gopi Janavalabhavyatante Haha Madasevamam. So he says, Na Prema Shavanadir Bhakti. He says, I have no love, I have no prema in my heart. Apita Yogotava Vaishnava. I'm not a real Vaishnava, I'm not good at yoga, I'm not Gyanam Vashrubakarma Vakya, the whole such. So he says, I'm not good with knowledge, I don't have much knowledge, I don't have very good karma. He says, basically, I have nothing to offer you, Krishna. But he says, Hey Gopi Janavalabha. He says, but my dear Krishna, you're the savior of the most fallen. Therefore, because I'm very fallen, then I have some hope that you'll lift me up and you'll save me. This is a beautiful prayer. One of the prayers that highly recommended to learn. It really gives us a mood of chanting. So moving on. So then after he chants the holy names, Charmi is asking a question. I'll get to this. And then we'll come to this question. Thank you for sending that through. So he's chanting the holy names, and then he's describing his fallen condition. So he says, Prasida Prabhu, Dukha Jalabdi Magnan, that I'm I'm dukkha, I'm unhappy. Jalabdi, we're Jalabdi Magnan. That's the meaning for that. I've got it written down. Immersed in the ocean of misery. That's what that verse means. So he's saying, please give me your mercy. I'm very miserable. And Sanatana Goswami says that this is the next step of a prayer. First, we offer glorification. Then we state our own position. We give some, show thing, but I'm trying. And then only after that, only after we say, we state our position, we express our humility, and then we come to the point where we can ask for something. So then he asks, by sharing your glance of mercy, please glance over me and become visible to my eyes. And this is also a very significant point, is the power of Krishna's glance. So he's asking for just a glance from Krishna. And when you think about it, it only took a glance from Lord Vishnu to create the entire universe. I'll do it after. Leave it there. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, just by the glance of Vishnu, he creates the entire universe. Just by one short glance, everything is manifest from that. And that's Vishnu, and Krishna is the source of Vishnu. And so then we can think about the power of Krishna's glance, how potent just one short glance can create a whole universe, how potent it would be just to receive Krishna's glance. And my spiritual master often gives this meditation for devotees who are sharing Krishna consciousness with others, book distributors and others, that every time you introduce someone to Krishna, then you receive Krishna's glance, because Krishna is very happy when we introduce other people to him. He always wants to expand his family and his service. So when we introduce someone to Krishna, then we get his glance. The same glance that Krishna used to impregnate the whole universe at the beginning of creation, that same glance comes to us when we introduce someone else to Krishna. So that's a beautiful meditation for sharing Krishna with others. Yeah, so this is the format Sanatana Goswami says for a prayer. First we glorify, then we state our position, we offer some humility, and then we can ask for a benediction, then we ask for something from Krishna. So now we'll come, I had a question. Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your association and talk. I had a question regarding the line, I am like a dead man. Please give me your mercy. Sometimes it's hard to think of myself like this. Even though I am so lowly and lost, how can I have this mood? Yeah, this is a good question. Sometimes we feel like this is, I just don't feel it. I'm just not there. I'm sure, I don't know if anyone has that experience. We read about all these beautiful prayers, but we can't quite get into it. But that's the beauty of having these prayers available, and that's why they were given to us by our acharyas and teachers, is that there's a principle called tadatma. Tadatma means that whatever you associate with, it begins to rub off. It begins to rub off on you. So the more we are actually associating with these prayers, we're reciting them, we're repeating them, we're trying to meditate on them. Although we're not feeling it right now, actually, this whole principle of tadatma allows that some qualities, some of the inspiration from these prayers and verses actually begins to rub off on us. So we actually start to, over time, as we're repeating this, as we're taking part in this process, we're starting to imbibe some of these moods. So that's the power of having these prayers available, is we're actually imbibing some of the mood each time we recite it. Over time, it becomes a deeper and deeper meditation until it becomes very genuine from our own heart. And that's why all of these acharyas like Prabhupada and all of our acharyas gave us so many prayers and so many different verses to recite and learn, and because they understand that we're not immediately able just to offer heartfelt prayers to Krishna. Sometimes you come before the deities or something and you don't know what to say, right? I don't know, maybe some of you also experienced this. You don't know what to say, because maybe we're not quite there. We don't quite fully feel it yet. But therefore we have all of these prayers to put the words into our mouth for us. And sometimes it can feel artificial, but we have to understand that slowly over time, these words rub off and that mood becomes genuine and deep within us. And then once you have that genuine connection, then you can make your own prayers to Krishna. Of course, it's always good to be personal and offer our own prayers as well. But if we're not feeling it, then we have these prayers to fall back on. I hope that helps, Charmy, a little bit. There's other ways to approach that, but that's just one approach to that question. Any other questions from these verses? I have one more thing I wanted to share with you. But if there's any questions specifically from these verses, then we can, devotees can ask now, either unmute or send on the chat. Okay, so let's go into this last bit. So this is something I was thinking about and meditating on. This whole pastime of the binding of Krishna, and then how I'm sure most of you know, or at least are aware of the full story. So Krishna is bound by Mother Yashoda, as it's described in this prayer. And then after he's bound, he actually drags the mortar between two very tall trees, and he pulls the trees down. So this is just after the binding of Krishna. He's thinking what to do, and Krishna is always very expert in achieving many purposes at once. When you hear about all of Krishna's pastimes, so everything has a meaning behind it or a reason. So Krishna is also being bound. He had some other motives as well, some other purposes to achieve. So once he was bound, he was naturally frustrated at being bound, but then he thought how to use it for his purpose. So he was playing with his friends, and he was tied to the mortar, and he was dragging the mortar and testing how much he can pull the mortar. Of course, he can lift unlimited universes, so he could pull the mortar if he wanted, but he was playing as Krishna, and he was tied by his mother's love, which is stronger than even him. And that's what this whole pastime is about. But anyway, so he dragged the mortar towards these trees, these Arjuna trees, and it described how these two trees actually in their past lives were demigods, sons of Kuvera. Sons of Kuvera. So they were very opulent demigods. But what happened was they weren't respectful. Narad Muni, a great sage, came before them, and they were actually enjoying with some women in water, and they were naked, and they didn't pay any respect. They didn't heed him. He walked past, and normally someone cultured would at least try and cover themselves and kind of apologize, and so he didn't. Sorry, Sankirtan Priya says not too much detail in the next verses. Sorry, I'm getting off track. Actually, he's right. I'm going too far. But the point was, and this is the main point that I wanted to make, is that Narad Muni, and maybe Sankirtan Priya, sorry, I'm stepping on the toes of the next person here a little bit, but I wanted to make this point, and I apologize. Narad Muni made them promise, or he made a promise. He cursed them, and then they became very sorry, and he promised that okay, I cursed you, but you're going to become trees, but I promise you that Krishna will liberate you. And so then I was just thinking how Prabhupada also made us that promise, not in the same way he didn't curse us, but he also told us that if you chant 16 rounds and you follow the 4 regs, then Krishna will accept you. You'll go back to Godhead. Initially, Prabhupada asked devotees to chant 64 rounds, and devotees weren't able to do it. So he reduced it to 16. And that's the power of a pure devotee. He's adjusting the terms by which Krishna will do. So it was 64 rounds, but Prabhupada, that he adjusted the level by which Krishna, and that's the power of the pure devotee. And by his promise, the strength of that promise, just in the same way that Krishna, only because of the promise of Narad Muni, otherwise he wouldn't have bothered with the trees. But because of Narad Muni's promise, he went. And also in the same way, Prabhupada has given us this promise that if we follow these instructions, if we chant 16 rounds and we try to follow the regulative principles of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna will accept us. Sometimes devotees question whether we can go back home in one life. Can I make it back in one life, back to Krishna in one life? Have too deep conditioning, or as I did so many sinful things before I came to Krishna consciousness. And sometimes devotees say, I'm definitely not in this life, maybe in a few lives' time. But actually, that's not the example that's being given here. Nalakuvera and Manigriv, they basically didn't do any significant devotional service. They did very little. But because of the promise of the pure devotee, because of the promise of Narada Muni, then he set the standard by which Krishna would accept them. Otherwise, Krishna wasn't. They weren't approaching him. Krishna in the Gita says, Sarva dharman prityaja. He says, surrender unto me. Mamekam sharanam vraja, just me alone, and then I will take care of you. Mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo, mokshayami ma suchaha. He said, don't fear, I'll take care of you. But the condition is you have to surrender fully. But actually, it's said that the devotee is kinder than Krishna because he set a standard less than that. Because they were just involved in sinful life. And so he lowered the standard and he said, Krishna will accept you after this, your term as trees. So in the same way that Narad Muni set this standard for Krishna accepting them, in the same way Prabhupada has set a standard for us in which Krishna will accept us. And that's the beauty of this practice of Krishna consciousness and the power of love, the power of the pure devotee. And that's really what this whole month is all about, is the power of the devotee to bind Krishna. Mother Yashoda could bind Krishna with her love, although he's unlimited and although, everything is him, and yet he's outside of everything. How can you bind something unlimited, which is already made of anyway? That doesn't even make sense in my mind, but the point is, how can you bind something which is unlimited? Krishna. So he was bound. Yeah. But by the love of the devotee. So in the same way, by the love of Narad Muni, then the trees were liberated, Nalakuvara and Manigriv were liberated. And also by the love of Srila Prabhupada, then we can also be liberated. Because the love of the devotee can conquer Krishna. And Krishna becomes bound, obliged to accept people based on their recommendation. Srila Prabhupada in one Radhastami lecture, he said, if Radharani recommends one to Krishna, then Krishna can't say no. So he was saying we should always try and serve Srimati Radharani, because if she recommends someone to Krishna, then Krishna is obliged to accept them because he loves her so much. So in the same, Krishna has this relationship with his devotees. He says in the Bhagavatam, Napari ham nirvadya samyujam. He says this to the gopis, that I can't repay you. I can't repay your service. I'm completely in debt to you for your love, for your service that you've given to me. How can I repay you? So Krishna, the Supreme Lord, he's feeling in debt to his devotees because of their service, because of their love. And so then he's willing to do whatever they want. So that should be our meditation, especially this month. We're trying to bind Krishna within our hearts. We're trying to offer some special service, offer some special love, something very unique that will really bind Krishna. And Krishna says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or maybe Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, I think, he says that I can't remember the Sanskrit, but he says, if a devotee approaches me for material opulences or other things he wants, then I give it very easily. But if he approaches me for pure devotion, then I don't give it so easily. So then the question is, why would Krishna give all of these material things easily, but not pure devotion easily? The answer is that because pure devotion controls Krishna. So Krishna is going to be very careful who he gives it to, because then they have power over him. And imagine if that power comes into the hands of the wrong person. So Krishna's very careful who he gives pure devotion to, because he doesn't want to spoil the atmosphere of pure love in Vrindavan. But that should be our meditation for this month, how we can bind the Lord. And that's what these 2 verses are talking about. This really feeling unworthy, feeling low, but at the same time hopeful that Krishna might give us his glance of mercy. And so we looked at those things in this session, how the verses were stating how we're in this fallen condition, but we're also seeking the Lord's mercy, seeking his glance, seeking to see him in our heart, and also to see him directly in front of us. Sanatana Goswami also says that the verse also gives the method for prayer, how we should pray, that we should first chant and glorify the Lord, then we should state our position, we should express our humility, and then we should ask for something, ask for a benediction. And finally, we discussed how Prabhupada also bound Krishna with his love, and through that love, he's asking Krishna to accept us if we simply follow what he asked us to do. So that was a few things we discussed today. We have a few minutes left if anyone has any comments or any questions on whatever we spoke today. No, everyone's happy. Sorry, Sankirtan, I hope I didn't go too much into next.
No. I was just saying that it was such a
good.
nice. I was mesmerized in the pastime, and suddenly, hey, oh, hang on, he's talking about Kuera and Manigriva. That's the next session.
Yeah, it's good you said that. I also got a little bit sidetracked there. Lost. I was.
Thank you. It was so nice. It was very mesmerizing and nice slides. I really enjoyed the names and the references. So thank you so much, Mari.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, I guess if there's no questions, then there's no harm in finishing early. Better to finish early than late, right?